Alright, let's get started. This one is going to be basically just a knight on a horseback, starting with 2000 by 2000 pixel canvas size, or 3000 by 3000 sometimes. And sometimes I'll do a HD dimension, which is, a standard HD is 1280 by 720 multiplied by 2 or 3. So when you have, I usually work 2 to 3 times the final size. Alright, now I'm making the background into a sky color, or sort of like a bluish tone with slightly green in the back there. And now I'm just applying color right off the bat because I just want to play with color. And this time I'm picking some sort of a complement. And when you are picking a complementary scheme, one color can be more saturated and the other color is less saturated. In this case, I'm picking green and dark red. Dark red is a bit more like a dirt tone, and on the horse, well, this is more like greenish toward a little more blue, mixing with the sky, and the red is going toward a little more orange. So it's still within the complement. If you look at the color wheels, you see that these two colors are the regular opposite to each other. So, but the green is more saturated. If you look at the scale that I have, usually I have the HSB scale, hue, saturation, and brightness. Or traditionally you call hue, saturation, and value, or HSV. Now, I'm just kind of playing around with the back and creating foliage for the forest or the garden in the back, just to prepare the base in the back. And usually I'll separate things into three depth: foreground, midground, and background. And within each depth, I might have a few layers, but ultimately, I'll merge it down into, or I'll try to minimize it to 3 layers, which is foreground, midground, background. Make it easier for me to manage. But before I merge, or usually I'll save a backup as version 1 or version 2, right? So now I'm trying to get the steed here. Steed is basically a stud, a horse, a male horse, basically. So usually I'll have a reference opened up for the horse, because they are hard, and sometimes I'll have to use multiple reference. Usually I'll have like reference laying around on the tablet right next to me, or if you have the second screen, you can open up reference there too. And sometimes if I have only one screen, then I'll just open up the reference right next to me. So good thing about using reference on the tablet is that you don't have to avoid picking color and everything like that. Or if you use second matter, it's also legit. That's fine. If you use reference, try not to like pick the color or anything from the reference. And even if sometimes if you do, the color might be off, because if your background is totally made up or something, it might not fit the color of the reference. So anyways, and I'm trying to play around with the brush stroke here. So trying to make it a little playful, basically. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to capture just the light and shadow and the essence of the muscle structure on the horse itself. Now, if every time I paint, or whenever you paint onto a canvas on the transparent layers, even if you put you notice, like, you can go back a few here and you see that I'm merging all the background together. But when I'm working, I'm pretty quick. So it's a routine that I will merge all the background together, and I will cut out just that particular piece if I want the character to be to be cut out from the background, then you will have to merge it. You have to make sure that the whole silhouette or the whole shape is opaque, 100% opaque, because otherwise, if you put some other modifier in there, it's going to change the color. But if your piece or your shape is 100% opaque, whenever you merge a modifier on top down to the bottom, and if the modifier has to be exactly the same shape, on top of the same shape, it can't overlap and it can't go out of the designated area. So, and if your base is not 100% opaque, it will ruin the whole thing when you merge it, or you have to merge it all the way down. So, all right, knowing this should make your job a lot easier. And sometimes when you merge just a few layers, you wonder, oh, why does it change, or things like that, right? So that is also come into play, the opaqueness of your color. So now I'm just trying to get the horse to look like a horse, but I'm using different type of brush to get a little more stylized or playful stroke. And now I'm adding the horse, what do you call, hair, basically, on the neck, mane, basically, horse mane. I always forgot what those are called. They're called mane, lion mane, horse mane, cat mane, I don't know. They might have cat mane. All right, now I'm making a clipping mask. Well, when I was painting those colorful brush stroke, I use layer clip mask. And if I want to tweak the silhouette, or if I want to make some change to the silhouette, say if I want to extend the leg, or if I want to add the ear, or add some more things to the shape, then I have to go to the base layer of this horse. You have a clipping mask, because you can't, on the clipping mask, it's just going to clip to that shape. You can't go outside the shape. So you want your shape you want to add something to the shape, maybe add some hoof, or tweaking, or deleting, or erasing part of the shape to make it a little more appealing, then you're going to have to go down to the base layer and do that. And now I'm going back to the clipping mask again and trying to add more form, or basically volume of the mask on this horse. All right, and I'm trying to add different color in there. Say if I'm starting off with the dark brown, I add a little more yellowish, golden brown. Then I'm adding a little more reddish color to some of it, just hoping that, you know, these two colors will push each other. You have to be careful when you play around with the different color, especially if you're playing the cool and warm. It's going to get gray pretty quick. So if you're playing around with the color within the same family, and what I mean by same family is like if they are closer to each other, or within the same temperature, it's a lot easier to manage, because when you overlapping them, they still have a pretty similar characteristic. Now, unlike, you know, if you put the complementary color right next to each other, it's just gonna, sometimes it can make pretty good result in terms of contrast, but sometimes it could clash. So you're gonna have to watch out for that. So it's really important to practice a lot and kind of know some of the theory, color theory. I wouldn't say color theory, because they are fact. Some of them are theory, but a lot of them that we've been using for a long time, they work, they're effective, and they basically based on numerical base of how, you know, the color and contrast would be as nowadays. All right, enough science talking. Because I mean, if those rules were not true or not working, then they probably wouldn't be able to put them into numbers and making Photoshop, right? So that must be true. All right, now tweaking the face, getting pretty close to the face of the horse that I want, and the pose. And I don't have to, a lot of time I'll leave something out, meaning I don't have to paint every single detail. Like if you look at the back leg of this horse, the back legs are not complete, and I will probably leave it like that because it's sometimes I kind of enjoy leaving something out so that everything that I paint are more like a suggestion of what it is. And to me, if the concept art can communicate to the audience that this is what it is, and make it pretty, and make the color look good, and then basically my job's complete. So it's important to kind of to know or to be able to leave something out without people noticing or without having it affecting your message, right? So if you're leaving something out and it's affecting your message, like if it's distorted your message, then you shouldn't leave something out. And if you leave something out in terms of like painting and you don't finish painting certain parts, you can just let it be the line drawn. Then and if the audience understand what you're trying to say, then you completed the job basically. So, but if you leave something out and it miscommunicates, then that's not good. So you have to know what you're trying to go in and add more detail and what you can leave out. So those are really important. That's all I want to say basically. All right. And I have to explain it for a long time. So now I'm trying to add more volume again. And I'm trying to figure out what to do with these hair or these mane of the horse. But then eventually I'm not going to have enough time to finish up or make the horse look super pretty. I can just make it look good enough like this is here. And as you can see, what I put earlier with the reddish orange and the golden brown, they work overlapping each. They like sitting right next to each other and overlapping. They work pretty well. That's what I'm saying. So at this point, I'm just gonna leave that. Like the area around the shoulder of the horse, I think those are what I'm looking for in terms of the color variation and the form and the volume. Now I'm making another layer on top, and I put the lighter color earlier because I thought it would be better in terms of trying to reading the silhouette, because I don't usually draw in before. I just getting the shape on right off the bat. But if I couldn't figure out the shape, I'll go back to drawing and try to make corrections on the drawing instead, because the shapes are harder to manage than when you're trying to, if you don't know something yet well, then you probably have to go in and trying to draw with line, then fill it in with the shape afterwards. You can do that, like, you can start drawing first. It's gonna take longer time. That's why I kind of shortcut it and make it faster and putting the shape in instead of trying to draw lines and then putting the shape in later, because eventually you're gonna have to put shapes in anyway in terms of adding color and value and all that, right? So just skipping the step and just putting the shape in right off the bat. And it is important to get the good shape. It's important that you have to be a solid drawer or you have a strong drawing skill to be able to pull off a nice shape, because shape basically is basically line, and you just fill in the line. So on the outline of your shape should have enough detail so that people will be able, the audience will be able to tell what these shapes are, because the outline of the shape are as important as your line drawn. So it has a lot of quite a bit of detail, enough important detail. All right, now I'm getting the silhouette of the knight to kind of it's good enough to my liking. Now I'm adding a little color. It's gonna be metal, but since it has a lot of green and red and the horse is toward the warm, I'm just gonna make the chainmail chainmail is the part that's inside the hard shell armor or the hard plate. I'm just going to make it a little more green, or it's basically gray, or black, but you can use some of the color to push it toward, like if you use green against or right next to the red and orange, it's going to be grayer than usual. So, but I already have that dark, well, on the plate color here, it has like a desaturated yellow or brown or kind of grayish brown color on the metal part. So right next to the green, it makes the green works really well, and the dark green kind of play off as the actual, make it more contrast in terms of value and temperature. So the metal look more shiny, basically, or trying to make it more shiny. Now I'm adding a little more color, then just gonna pick the skin tone, and I'm just gonna apply the skin tone on top of it, or maybe I'll make a clipping mask. Yeah, it's a clipping mask that I've been painting on top of the silhouette. So I'm just gonna add it, the color on the same layer that I paint the armor for this. All right, and I'm adding some indication of the lighting direction, and all right, so now I'm trying to get the shape of the helmet and the shoulder to look nice. Basically, this involves material study, and you're gonna have to know what kind of material you want to put onto your painting. And if you don't know material, I recommend getting the my painting tutorial on the material stuff. You can go to my website, theartclasses.com. You'll probably be able to find it and download it. It's probably chapter 8, or I'm not sure what chapter it is. But if you get the ultimate, digital painting tutorial, you probably get 1 or 2 lessons on the material. Or you can just Google material study on Google, and you'll be able to find some of the material. It's not the texture, because a lot of people mistaken material for the texture. Is basically the value range of each material and how the material interact with the light. For instance, metal, and steel and iron and anything that has the element of metal are going to have more specular level than the rest of the material in the world. So that means they are shinier. So they reflect the light back, and they have a little more they have more value range onto itself. So let's just say if you are painting metal, you can use scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 scale in terms of value, or 1 to 5 value range. And your fabric is going to be 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 in terms of scale or value range, which your fabric will have less specular level or less value range. And the reason I'm saying fabric, I mean the fabric that are dull, like cotton, or like jeans, and fabric that doesn't reflect the light back. So those are going to have a lower specular level than metal. So in terms of painting, you probably want to restrict your use of fabric into 2 to 3 tone, and your metal is going to have 5 tone or more. In terms of, like, if I'm speaking normal language that people would understand, I would say tone. Maybe I'm not sure you understand what I'm trying to say here, so I'm just trying to use an easy word. But if I use tone, it's probably good enough or kind of correct enough, but it's not really a proper tone. Tone is probably not a correct vocabulary for this. You probably have to use value instead. Anyways, so as you can see, the dark part of metal plates are a little shinier, and the black part on the inside could be chainmail or fabric. If it is chainmail is also metal, but the reason they are less, they are not as shiny as the bigger plate is because of the surface of it are not as smooth, right? If your surface of the object are connected well together, it's on the same plane, then you're going to receive more light. And when you receive more consistent light, then it makes the object have more ability or more surface area for the light, so it gets shinier. But if the surface area is less, let's just say that the chainmail have the less surface area because it got bumped, it's going in and out, even though it's on the same plane sometimes, but the surface that receiving the surface area that receive the light is not as much as the plate itself. So I hope that makes sense. And fabric, always make less because it have less value range. Now I'm trying to add a bit more decoration, or what do you call this? I forgot what it's called. It's on the tip of my tongue. The horse gear, basically. It has a name for it, but I forgot since English is not really my native. So range, yeah, it has a range on the horse, and now she's holding the range, and then I'm just gonna add more straps that would make part of range. All right. Now, as you can see, the shadow side, I will make it darker blue. On the light side, I'll make it lighter blue. Oh, baby, kind of closer to baby blue. And then I'm gonna make the saddle, or the seat, I guess. And they'll probably have some, I'm not sure if I'm gonna have enough time to finish the seat. If not, I'll just leave it open because maybe elf don't need what do you call that? I forgot again. It has a proper name. Everything for the horse and the rider has a proper name for each part or each thing. You have to Google it to be able to find it. All right, now I give the horse a blue eye for some reason. Horse never have blue eyes, just kind of brown and black. And I'm adding a little tail to the pony. All right. Let's see if there's something else I could do. I could add a darker value underneath the back leg, just to give enough suggestion, and some lighter part onto its hips. Then I slowly adding a little more texture onto the bottom part of the horse. I mean the lower half of the horse. All right, now, and you can see if you look at my Photoshop file, you can see I use a lot of clipping masks these days. Sometimes I'll use a selection tool instead. Just make selection and paint on top of the selection. It's basically the same thing, similar, but clipping masks make it a lot easier to understand it visually when somebody else is looking at your file. So if you're using just a lasso tool as a selection and you have layer on top, it might be a lot harder to kind of see and understand. All right, now I'm trying to reframe this composition, but I think I'm using the wrong value. I can use a green, but it's probably better if I use a lighter value. I'm not sure. I'm just gonna put it there for now. And time to make the foliage a little more, give the foliage a little more volume, basically, to have it light and dark, and some part that get hit by the light and some part that are in the shadow, right? So All right, and more foliage on the left side of the screen. So at this point, I'm just trying to figure out what would make the character stand out a little more. Usually I'll just, usually what I do is if your character has a lighter color, I will put a darker color behind it. And if the character has a lighter color, I'll put a darker color right behind it. Or if you're using color, you're gonna have to kind of push it to the opposite direction to make whatever it is in the front stand out a little bit more. Now I'm just trying to add tiny bits of detail on to this foliage because I have a little extra time, because I want to play up the foliage a little bit. And in this kind of this part of the process I call selective painting. So you just kind of select certain part and that you think will be important or crucial element to your concept or painting, then you kind of trying to beef it up a little bit and trying to give it more form and trying to make whatever you can do to it to support your composition or to make something stand out a bit more, right? So now we're almost there and I think it looks fine. And I'm adding a little darker value beneath the horse. Maybe there's a shadow or something. No way, if it has a shadow, it probably has to shine the other way. So it's not the shadow. Just making the ground dark because it's so closer to the foreground. If it's the darker, then it's had to angle a little bit to the left side of the screen. All right. Now I'm trying to take a look to this overall and see what I can do to make it look better. So I'm just gonna use overlay. And I'm just gonna add a bit more light, directional lighting, and some light onto the back. And I'm gonna add directional lighting onto the character. So that's more light, more light, more light that hitting. And light come in one direction. So you have to remember your light source, where they are coming from. It is very important because without light, there wouldn't be any painting or photography, or we wouldn't be able to see. So light and painting is the same thing because basically everything exists, everything visually exists with light. Without light, there would be no visual. So you wouldn't be able to see, and if you wouldn't be able to see, you wouldn't be able to imagine. So, all right. I usually make a mistake sometimes when I flip, because sometimes I thought, hey, lighting's coming from the top right or top left or whatever, and when I flip, in my head, I still think, hey, lighting still coming from the same direction, and usually it's turned out pretty bad. I have to go back and undo on the history into multiple stage. So be careful when you pick the light, and sometimes you flip, then you have to be aware of your light's also flipping along with the image, so it's not on the same direction anymore. All right, guys. Well, we still have a couple more minutes left. I'm just gonna add some light onto these foliage a little bit, and we're gonna have the few minutes. Basically, this is done, and I don't know what else to talk about. So I'm just gonna thank you, everybody.